Hello and welcome to the Tournament Center here at Pro Tour Kaladesh in Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm Brian David Marshall, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Zac Elsik.
Thank you.
You may recognize him as the brain behind Lantern Control. Whether that's an evil brain or a good brain, I leave that to you to decide. I know a few people think it's pretty evil, but that's fine. So you're playing a control deck here in this standard format.
Right.
And you found a couple of cheap artifacts that you enjoy playing with again, but a slightly different take. It's a Jeskai Control deck. Tell us about where this deck sits in this new Kaladesh metagame.
The goal was to have a deck that could combat Smuggler's Copter, right? That seemed to be the popular card. And Harness Lightning and a lot of good red removal do that trick. The blue cards help gain an advantage, whether that's counter spells or draw spells. And so it felt like a nice mesh of typical control cards with a really powerful top end, the blue Gearhulk.
Now, were you prepared for Aetherworks Marvel when this deck was being built? Was that a card that was on your mind?
It was. I originally wanted to play with that card. When that card was first spoiled, I got very excited.
Yeah, me too.
I love combo decks. But like the decks that I came up with just failed a little bit too often, and so I wanted to play something with control. And it turns out when you're playing with counter spells, it's really hard as a combo player to combo off when you can't resolve one of the 4 cards in your deck.
Right. So if you can't have fun with Aetherworks Marvel, you're not going to let anyone else have fun with it either. Okay. Let's take a look at how you pulled this deck together. Let's take a look at some of the blue. Well, this is Jeskai Control, Torrential Gearhulk, Dynavolt Tower, and Nahiri, the Harbinger, one of the cards from previous sets that's made its way into this deck. Talk to me about these 3 cards and the roles they fill in finishing off games for you.
So we'll go in order. The blue Gearhulk feels like Snapcaster Mage, except it attacks and closes games very fast. The important instants in the deck are removal, cards that draw cards, and counter spells. So to have a card that can choose any of those 3 options is very, very powerful. Nahiri, there's not that many in this deck, but she plays an important role because she helps exile tapped artifacts like Smuggler's Copter or creatures. She also ults very quickly, which gets the blue Gearhulk, and at the end of turn it goes back to your hand for even more value.
I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of this deck.
Absolutely.
A free Gearhulk that then gets you a free spell that then comes back up to your hand, and then you can flash in for another free spell.
Yes.
Pretty exciting.
And the final piece of the puzzle is Dynavolt Tower, which looks a little out of place here. But
it really does.
In a control deck with a lot of instants and some sorceries, your energy accumulates very quickly, and that card almost plays the role of like a Wrath. So instead of you clean up everything, it just constantly picks off creatures while you have your other removal picking off creatures, and it holds the fort. It also shoots planeswalkers, which is kind of neat.
All right, let's take a look at some more cards that make this deck come together. Let's talk about some of the red removal that you're using to pick things off. A couple of instants, 1 sorcery in the middle. I guess these 2 here are thinking about copters at some point.
Right. So Bombardment not necessarily hits Copter right away, but it does hit the aggressive strategies, which will buy you time. Incendiary Flow is very important because of the Scrounger guy who comes back from the graveyard, or Haunted Dead. Since most players activate it on your 2nd main phase, then you can just Incendiary Flow it on the same turn. And Harness Lightning, while normally only killing something with 3 toughness, because our deck has a few Aether Hubs and the towers, it can go all the way up to 5 or 8 toughness. So it's almost like a murder.
Yeah, the red removal in this has looked great.
Very good.
Now let's take a look at some of the blue cards that make this deck go. Let's take a look at some of the counter spells. Well, technically blue, I guess, or not technically blue. A couple of them have no color.
So Void Shatter is the best one to have because it just counters anything. Spell Shrivel is there to ease up the mana a little bit, and it's mostly just a hard counter because a lot of decks just don't get up to that much mana.
Sure.
The fact that it exiles is relevant because there is a bit of graveyard recursion and some things that care about Delirium. Grapple with the Past, for example, makes it harder. Negate plays an important role because if this deck is soft to, say, Planeswalkers or Aetherworks Marvel, Negate fixes that.
Main deck Negate just seems mean.
It does. It does. It's about to get meaner because vehicles are not creatures. So on the play, you can negate a Smuggler's Copter. And
Wonderful.
That helps a lot.
All right, let's take a look at what else goes in here. A little bit of card selection and card drawing. Glimmer of Genius obviously helps work towards your energy strategies, but also drawing you cards. And this seems to be the card when I've watched you play this deck, when you've Torrential Gearhulked, it seems like most often Glimmer of Genius is the card you're flashing back with it.
Right, and that's the case usually, because if you flash back a counterspell or removal, then you get a Hulk and you 1-for-1. But if you flash back a Glimmer, because nothing else is going on, you draw 2 cards out of your top 4, more or less. These 2 cards really hold the deck together. Anticipate lets you consistently make land drops or find the cheap removal that you need. And Glimmer pulls you ahead of any mid-range or control strategy, because first it's 2, then it's 4, and they can't necessarily play around it because it's an instant speed, so they don't know when it's going to happen. It's a very solid card. I love that one.
One of the things I heard you talking about yesterday was the idea that this deck was built so that you couldn't destroy yourself with your Torrential Gearhulks if you get Emrakul. What was that struggle like in terms of building the deck?
That was definitely something that I looked for, because I knew Emrakul was popular, the last Pro Tour. I originally started with like a blue-white control that had a lot of the white removal said opponent's creature. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't hurt that bad when they take my turn, because if they Gearhulk, they can't do much except draw cards. They can't counterspell the Gearhulk. And the same in this deck. The only card that hurts is Harness Lightning, because they throw away all your energy. But typically, if you're not left with Gearhulks, you have about 6 man lands left that you can attack with.
All right, well, speaking of the lands, let's take a look at how you pull this all together. Some of the new, fast lands. Talk about Inspiring Vantage, Spire Bluff Canal, and Prairie Stream, pulling you, finding you your white as well as your red and blue.
The fast lands, very big in this deck. You could try like a Grixis build or another variant, but this is the best 3-color combo because you get 8 fast lands, which lets you consistently use removal on turn 1 or 2, and it lets you consistently anticipate, which sets up your future turns. So these are very big players.
All right, let's take a look at the rest. You talked a little bit about some of the creature lands, Wandering Fumarole, Needle Spires. I saw it round 6 yesterday. That was, you got your 8th land and just like bashed or your 10th land, I guess,
10th land,
and bashed 2 of your lands in and were able to win that match.
Right, yeah. You don't activate them that often because typically the blue Gearhulk is enough, but when you're out of everything else, then they help. They help a lot. They also block. So for example, the Blistering Hydra, it's kind of hard to deal with, but you can buy time by blocking until you can draw out of it.
Okay, then Aether Hub, a land everyone's been pretty excited about, and sometimes just incidentally helps you in your pursuit of more energy.
Yes, Aether Hub, important. Sometimes that 4th energy alongside Harness Lightning is relevant, but the color fixing comes up more often.
And then how do you end up as your basic lands are just 7 islands? You don't want any of the other red land, any mountains or anything like that?
Right. So all of the other duels, the Needle Spires, Fumarole, and the fast lands, they all make red.
Okay.
So you don't need mountains. And there's only 2 white cards in the main. So you really just want to hit islands and get double blue for Void Shatter and Gearhulk.
Okay. Zac Elsik, how's the deck been working out for you so far? You're pretty happy with it through this point in the tournament?
Yes. I believe I'm 5-1 in constructed so far. So I love the deck. I love control, and it generates a lot of advantage, and it attacks at a weird angle of flash. All the cards have flash, so it's been very strong for me.
All right, as we said yesterday on the floor, control is dead. Long live control. Zac Elsik's your man to bring it to you here from Pro Tour Kaladesh.